Hey, welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone.
Hoo-ah!
Pasta Jardula here. So, I know I promised special guests today, co-host, whatnot. I've made contact with both of them. Our co-host for today is supposed to be Cynthia McKinney. Hopefully, she'll be along soon. I know she had long travels ahead of us, so she might be wiped out cold. But hopefully, she'll jump up and get up on here with us. So Cynthia McKinney is supposed to be the special guest today, co-host that is, for the show. And I thought it was going to be so awesome, and I hope it still is. So hopefully she'll get on and jump on as soon as she can, because the guest today is Whitney Webb. Now, when I booked Whitney Webb, Fiorella was supposed to be on the show. She had wanted Whitney to come back on, a lot of things she wanted to talk about. And I always love talking about Whitney Webb. And I thought today, since Whitney's going to come on the show, rather than just get all the receipts and the work and all that great stuff that Whitney does, we can just get maybe her reaction to what's going on at Davos in the West, in the WEF, and play some of the videos of some of the people speaking there and get our opinions on that. And we can still go ahead and go and do that. We will do that when Whitney gets on in about 10 minutes. But hopefully Cynthia McKinney will be joining us. I am trying to find Cynthia to get her back on, to make sure she has the connections to get on. I'm going to keep bothering her as I'm doing right now. And hopefully she'll jump on, because Cynthia really wanted to come on with Whitney too as well. She was excited about it. And here I am, think I'm setting up the most awesome thing in the world. I'm going to have Whitney Webb and Cynthia McKinney on. I was just going to sit back and once again be that sponge and absorb and enjoy and have a great time. So hopefully they'll be along soon. I have made contact with Whitney, so Whitney should be ready very shortly. If you missed the morning show today, you missed Johnny Vedmore on, and also Ricky Varandas joined today. What a great show, fun show today. I left for the last hour. Hunter jumped in. Everybody loves Hunter. She's doing an amazing job. She did an amazing job. So please check that out. That's the morning show. So we are still waiting for our guest, our co-host. Hopefully that co-host will jump on in. And also our guest for the evening will be one Whitney Webb. So please check us out. Do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button. There's only 79 watching. Is Jilly Love in the chat today? Where is Jilly Love? I know Lucky Burrito is there. Lucky, I'm going to call you after. We got some things to talk about. This craziness and madness is going on. What all this other shite is going on. So we're going to have a little talk, me and my good friend Lucky Burrito, later on, because I need to get, up to date with all the scuttlebutt. Pasta, can you ask Whitney Webb if she thinks, if she likes early punk? Isn't early punk the only real punk, right? Guys, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button. I am still trying to get our guest, our co-host on. Let me see. I'm going to try to call her right now. See if that works. So we're calling Cynthia McKinney here. See if it works. Come on now. Come on, ring. Here we are. Come on. Guys, it's not working yet. But our co-host should be along shortly, I'm hoping. Had a long day of travels. We love Cynthia McKinney, regular of the show, fam for sure. I call her the last great congresswoman or congressperson, because she's the last one to step up and really take one for the team. When it came to elections, she was out there calling them out for what they are. When it came to 9/11, she was pushing for an independent investigation. I love you too, Trey Wright. The woman has done so much. She stuck her neck on the line. You know what I'm saying? I'm surprised, that they're still not trying to put her down. I mean, she's just amazing. Cynthia McKinney, she's one of our favorites. I would love to see her get more involved with politics today. Hasn't answered yet, but hopefully she'll join us and we will be able to get her on the show. So that's that. But we will have Whitney Webb on very shortly. I've sent her the link. Let's get into it. There are so many things to talk about. I mean, there's things in the doc from the morning show and the Convo Couch that we haven't even gotten to. It's been that crazy of the week. But let's start off with this whole kind of like make-believe playing by the WEF and the people in the WEF and everybody involved. I'm going to make this bigger right here. This is Jeffrey Tucker. Everyone at the WEF talks like mRNA tech for vaccines has been a great success with wonderful future and programmable shots. It seems incredible that they actually believe this. Let's bring in our guest right away. Whitney Webb is with us here today. Whitney,
Hey.
how you doing?
Hey, doing good. How are you doing?
Well, I think my co-host is asleep. She had long days of travel, and this wasn't a great time for her. But when I told her that you were going to be on the show, she was so excited. She had so many questions to talk to you about. She went running. I got to grab her book. I haven't even got into it. So she was so excited. And here I am thinking to get that I put together. Well, Fiorella, she had to opt out this week because she got sent to the Donbass. She'd been wanting to go there to do
Oh,
reporting.
right.
So
That's
she's in
probably
the
really
Donbass.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah. So here I am. I'm like, well, I got Whitney, and you've been asking me to get Whitney on, and now Whitney's on, and you're not going to be here. So I got to fill in the blanks. So I go reaching out to Cynthia, and Cynthia's like, hell yeah, let's do that. And I think she's asleep.
Oh.
She had crazy traveling to do, but I'm going to stay
Hey,
on
that's
top of her.
okay. It happens. No worries.
I know it does, and I know you're cool with it. So instead of me sitting back and just watching two awesome women have great conversations, because that's all I wanted to be was a fly on the wall. It's two of my favorite people, Whitney Webb and Cynthia McKinney, were going to be in the same show together chatting, and it was going to be on my show. It's like, oh my God, moment in time. But we'll go along with it, and hopefully she'll jump on in. This is the time, ladies and gentlemen, where we have to leave YouTube. We cannot stay on YouTube, unfortunately, because they will take us down. They will give us strikes. I know some people are saying, well, some shows can talk about things. Well, some shows have a bigger profile and they have more eyes on them. So it will be more explaining to do if they take them down. Some of the shows that are right under 100,000, above 20,000, they're in the danger zones. They can't talk about certain things that other shows can talk about. So unfortunately, we're going to have to jump off of YouTube. But everybody, Lucky, put the links to the chat for the Rumble, put the links to the chat for the Rokfin in the chat, and let's get on over there. We're going to remove YouTube now, guys. We're leaving YouTube in 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1. Come on over. Whitney Webb is with us. Hopefully, Cynthia McKinney will be along. We're going to talk about Davos and get Whitney's reactions to what took place, the shit show that's actually still taking place right now. So that's it for YouTube, guys. We'll see you later. Get on over to Rumble. Get on over to Rokfin. We love you here with Whitney Webb. Bye-bye. So that's it, Whitney. We're off YouTube. You can
All
breathe.
right, good. I'm allowed to talk now.
You are allowed to talk. And God, this is so crazy. Like, I don't give a shit who you bring up. In this case, I have Jeffrey Tucker because he was one of the first people that I saw to bring this up. But this is what's going on over there. And it's bonkers. I mean, you don't even have to watch independent media right now, even in the mainstream media, which is a bunch of BS, but they have to kind of swallow their pride, eat crow, and admit that these mRNA shots didn't work like they were supposed to work. But yet they still at the WEF, and I have a bunch of videos of all these just awesome people like Christopher Wray, the FBI, the Mr. Kemp, from the governor of Georgia, that are actually, and I don't understand how they can think this is okay. They actually go to Davos, they speak, and they think there's going to be no repercussions. But this kind of rhetoric, Whitney, that the fact that even though that they've been proven that these shots are not working, they don't stop transmission, I can expect the independent media idiots that bought into this stuff, people like Kyle Kalinske, who said, well, the drug companies lie to you their whole lives, but they're telling the truth here on this one, so you should believe them. Like, I expect it from them. But to still go to the left and kind of talk all this stuff as if these shots work, what is your thoughts on them just, hey, don't let the truth get in the way of a good bullshit story?
But it's not just the WEF. Isn't this still the mainstream media consensus, or like the Biden administration, that these are like still safe and effective and you should keep getting them ad nauseum forever, like the bivalent stuff? I mean, I was supposed to come back to the US in May and now I can't because Johnny can't come in still because they extended the COVID vaccine mandate for foreigners to get into the US. So I mean, this isn't like exclusive to the WEF. But as for Jeffrey Tucker's tweet that you had up, I think it's silly to think that they actually believe it. I think that's assuming that the WEF people, what they're publicly saying is what they actually privately believe. I don't think that's true at all. So if you look at Moderna, for example, and how they developed their COVID-19 vaccine, it was at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in January 2020 where Stefan Bancel, the Moderna CEO, was
Mhm.
basically tipped off that there was going to be a giant pandemic in a couple of months' time, and before then had already started developing a vaccine for it, allegedly, if you believe their narrative. I mean, I wrote a whole series about the lead up to that, but this
Yeah.
is technology that Davos has been heavily promoting for a very long time, the mRNA stuff, and also DNA vaccines, CRISPR technology, everything that comes sort of under this um what they're, genetic medicine, gene therapy umbrella. And so in mRNA technology and also in these other technologies, an insane amount of money has been invested in a slew of companies. Moderna just being one example, but Moderna is a very well-connected example, having a lot of ties to DARPA, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, and other groups. And without a situation like COVID, none of this brave new era, brave new world of medicine would have happened, because mRNA vaccines, particularly in the case of Moderna, could not come to market. They could not get past animal trials because of toxicity and safety concerns. And so the only way for these products to get on the market was to have those hurdles, regulatory hurdles, removed under the guise of emergency, because the only way you can justify in the existing system in the US the removal of those hurdles is by a state of emergency, or
Mhm.
emergency authorization, right?
Okay. Yeah. I
So
don't mean
I
to
think the
interrupt you though,
WEF,
but I have a question though, and I
yeah.
don't mean to interrupt you mid speech, and I'm digging everything you're saying. But the one thing I want to get straight really quickly, because me and Steve, we had our show this morning, and we were talking about Jacinda, opting out and leaving, and then there's some people who've been putting up the Nuremberg 2.0, which I think me and Steve both believe is a bunch of BS. We saw what happened in Nuremberg 1. It was just for show operation, paperclip. Everybody came through. But you did mention in the beginning of your statement that this is what these people believe in secret about mRNA still working and whatnot. Do you think they honestly do believe that, Whitney, or they're willfully lying?
So
Because
there's a lot of different people that attend the World Economic Forum, right? But I
okay,
think the vast majority of them don't think these mRNA vaccines are as safe and effective as they would claim. Because obviously the evidence isn't there. And how many times have you heard from people that have had 4 doses or more announce also that they've tested positive for COVID?
yeah,
So, I
like on the
mean,
reg.
no, I mean, but they have to keep up appearances because they, shilled for it the whole time before and shilled for this technology, up to a decade, maybe longer.
Yeah.
Roughly a decade, I guess, before COVID even existed. I think this is just more promotion of how their certain policies they really like. It's just a way of continuing to promote them. And now they have talking points, because I mean there are still people that believe the narrative that's been propagated over the past few years, that these saved, I mean, even Trump, right,
Yeah, yeah.
recently asked about it, and he was like, it saved millions of lives, even though there's no like actual data to support that claim. But they're saying it when it benefits them. And so in the case of the World Economic Forum, you have to remember that they are one of the key drivers behind what Klaus Schwab calls the fourth industrial revolution. And they define that as a merging of human, roughly of human and machine, our physical and digital identities merging, and physical and biological and digital selves all coming together. And the brain implant stuff has been thrown out there, but so has this gene therapy stuff, under the guise of this fourth industrial revolution stuff. Synthetic biology, biotechnology are a huge part of this. And in order to keep pushing the fourth industrial revolution envelope, and advancing those policies, you have to, tout success
Mhm.
when necessary. And the other side of this too is that it's very clear to me, at least, that there's going to be an effort to repeat what we saw with the COVID crisis in the not so distant future, definitely well before the end of this decade. And the reason I think that is because of these efforts to quietly amend the international health regulations, and then also the installation of someone like Jeremy Farrar to be chief scientist of the World Health Organization. And some of these simulations with the same people that did Event 201, or a few decades prior did Dark Winter before the anthrax attacks, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, after the amendments in to the IHR in the pandemic treaty of the WHO was shot down by a large number of mainly African nations. Then they have the WHO, Bill Gates, and the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security has a simulation about a pandemic that devastates Africa specifically, and specifically African children. It's basically like a stomach flu, like an enterovirus, which usually affects pretty young kids. Like both my kids got it from daycare and stuff, but like a weaponized version of that going through Africa. And how would this change how African leaders felt about the international health regulation amendments and stuff? So when you're having the WEF annual meeting, probably some people watching saw Tony Blair's statements, from example, about how for the vaccines that are going to come down the line, we need vaccine passports. Technically, if you believe the official story that COVID-19 is zoonotic and all of the stuff and the way it emerged, in the narrative of how medical science and these types of events have been sort of described to the public, this is supposed to be like if not a once in a generation, a once in a century type of event. Right. Per their narrative. So why are they making all these preparations for something that, if you believe that, would happen 100 years roughly from now? Doesn't really make a lot of sense that their focus would be there, unless they anticipated it happening a lot sooner. And I think also one of the reasons that they wanted to sort of link COVID-19 to some sort of zoonotic origin is to sort of link its emergence to climate change alarmism and things like that, to basically, if it emerges sooner than 100 years from now, to essentially blame climate change for that having happened.
That's interesting. Wow. I never thought of it that way as well. I mean, I
Well, the
always thought that
narrative
it
was
was
set up there, yeah,
yeah.
and that part of the reason, it was an environmental reason why the zoonotic origin allegedly happened, but I think it's pretty clear at this point. Even mainstream media doesn't believe the zoonotic origin story to an extent. But one of the main people that propagated that narrative was Jeremy Farrar, who again is going to be the chief scientist of the World Health Organization pretty soon. He's head of the Wellcome Trust, which is very nefarious organization that not a lot of people know about. Johnny Vedmore and I did a podcast that just went public, I think yesterday, about Jeremy Farrar's background and some of the details about these particular amendments at the World Health Organization. That none of it's good. But Jeremy Farrar in particular is very disturbing in the sense that he essentially, as a response to COVID, as head of the Wellcome Trust, was to create a global health DARPA equivalent designed by a former DARPA director that wants to test crap out on kids 3 months of age to 3 years of age and have their brains mapped and have their eye be under constant surveillance and eye tracking technology and all of this stuff. 80% of kids by 2030. What a fun world. If the chief scientist of the World Health Organization gets his way.
No, it's crazy. I
Totally
really
crazy.
thought, I always thought that linking it to, a bat or a bird or anything else was always just to shield them from the fact that it came from a lab. But that was an interesting point you pointed out over there, as far as linking it to the environment and possibly climate lockdowns down the road and whatnot, and that whole connection there. And I really want to
There's been mainstream media efforts over the time to gauge how successful that narrative would be with the public. I mean, if you were paying attention during the COVID era, there was definitely stuff that was stories that were seeded about how climate change is going to make events like COVID a lot more frequent and things
Yeah.
like that. Because they're trying to set you up to, believe that this once in a century event is going to happen multiple times in less than 10 years, essentially, which
because of humans' piss poor attitude and treatment of the 99% treatment of the ozone layer in Mother Earth, not the bombs dropping or the private jets or anything else that's really the main
sure.
cause of, I hear you. And while we're at it too, I just really want to send a shout out to James Roguski, whose Substack, because they took down his website, really was ahead of everybody when it came to
Yeah,
international
on the
health
WHO stuff.
regulations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mhm.
So he called me like 2 days after he found it. He goes, Pasta, I don't know what it is. I woke up and I said, something's going on. I started digging, and all of a sudden I see this, and he's been on top of the IHR, which really says a lot about what they're trying to do, right? I mean, I get it that we have nothing but kabuki theater in front of us. Here comes Cynthia McKinney. Let's get her right in when she gets hooked up. I know that's kabuki theater that when we look at what happened in New York, right? When they slipped all these type of regulations into the New York Health Department in their regulations, they didn't go through the procedures of law and order, of going to a courtroom, of going to board meetings or city councils, where even though it is kabuki theater, though, it's got to be done in front of you. It was just a power grab. And what the WHO is doing right now when it comes to the international health regulations, or if that doesn't work out, a treaty in which they grab all this power without any elected officials, and now they're even in private having conversations about what they want to do. It's just that, when people like yourselves get a hold of this information and get it out, it really helps. But what are your thoughts about the way they're just trying to grab power? And let's bring in Cynthia McKinney, who is here on the show today.
Not yet.
Oh, all right. I'll remove you. You let me know. You give me the thumbs up. Let's give her a couple seconds. Cynthia McKinney is in the house. But go ahead with your thoughts on that.
All right. So my thoughts on the WHO and what exactly on how they're trying to force
the way they're just grabbing power without going through any, even though it's kabuki theater, any of the rules and regulations.
So this can only happen because a lot of people have a complete misconception of what the United Nations is today and how it is operating. Most people in the United States, and I would assume elsewhere, I can only really speak of the places where I've lived. This viewpoint I'm about to explain is also probably in my opinion, the mainstream view of the United Nations in Chile, where I live. It's, a meeting of the different public sectors of the world all coming together to coordinate and do things and that's how it's been framed for a long time, but that's not how the UN or the World Health Organization actually work in practice. So for example, as an example, in the late 90s, the head of the UN, Kofi Annan, at the time, gave a speech at the Davos meeting that year at the World Economic Forum. He basically, I can't remember if he called it a silent or a quiet revolution, but he said, the silent revolution has taken place at the UN in recent years. And now, we're predominantly, focused on the businesses of the world, and the businesses of the world is the business of the UN. And basically, talked about how the private sector was increasingly influential in guiding United Nations policy. And of course, by that, what he really means is multinational corporations having an undue influence there. And you can see that at the World Health Organization, or the fact that there's significant funders of said organization that are not governments. It's not a government funded entity exclusively. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is probably the most well-known of that nonprofit list, but I think a lot has been said about Bill Gates and his affiliations over the years, and how his interest in healthcare is really something else. Well, I mean, even Bill Gates has said that pretty openly himself, that one of the reasons he's invested so heavily in vaccines is because of the return on investment in those donations, and that philanthropy is so significant compared to anything else he's ever invested in his life, and it's part of this broader effort by billionaires to mask what really is impact investing as philanthropy. And, I mean, Gates, for example, in 2011 is meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, Larry Summers, and the head of Barclays Bank to try and develop a JP Morgan backed charitable health fund that Epstein was going to get a bunch of fixer fees for. Does that sound like someone that cares about health? So anyway, this is the type of stuff that, I almost called it by the Spanish acronym. Sorry.
That's okay.
The WHO, what?
That's okay. I'd like to hear it in Spanish.
No, it's the OMS
Okay.
in Spanish. Sorry.
I thought you were going to go OMS.
Yeah. Yeah. So, essentially you're having an organization that is for a long time has been operating as a public-private partnership, not as an entirely public organization. And so they are influenced by billionaires, by corporate power. And all you have to do to see what that does to a healthcare system is what? Just look at the US, where, multinational corporations, big pharma corrupt our public sector, and how those public-private partnerships between the US government and big pharma tend to go. And the COVID-19 example, I mean, that's pretty clear who benefited there, and it wasn't the public, right? And what does a public-private partnership even mean when the public sector is corrupted by the private sector, that being the multinational corporation, right? You're essentially having putting the private and the public on an equal playing field, but the public's servants are funded by the private sector. So anyway, essentially what you have there is the World Health Organization. And for a long time before COVID, and I've talked about this in past interviews, there were efforts to test among the public which particular sector, which industry was deemed to be the most trustworthy by the global public. And the result was overwhelmingly healthcare workers.
Really?
So, yeah, and that's how you get groups like the White Helmets in Syria, for example. Because they wanted, a cutout that would
Why do you think that
be
is?
the group that people trusted the most. Rescue workers, healthcare workers, people that, if most people think of putting other people's lives before their own, I think, is why people would trust them more. But that's obviously not what we've seen over the past few years. And I don't think that's necessarily how the healthcare industry works, especially not if you're talking about big pharma. Yeah. So the World Health Organization is being used as a vehicle for this power grab, but the people more interested, there's people pulling the strings here that are interested in having the World Health Organization wield such enormous power, and obtain this type of power. And you just have to look at someone like Jeremy Farrar. So, Tedros, impronounceable last name, is nominally ahead of the World Health Organization. But there's been a lot said about how his relationship with Bill Gates and other prominent people. And it's very likely that he's not the one developing and setting this policy unilaterally, even though with these amendments, he would have unilateral power to do an awful lot. But let's talk about Jeremy Farrar again for a second.
Let's bring in Cynthia so she can be part of this conversation, ladies and gentlemen. Cynthia McKinney is here with Whitney Webb.
Hi.
So, hi, Whitney. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Great to see you.
Even though I'm jet lagged, and I hope I'm coherent by the end of this program. But anyway, I'm happy to be with you and Craig.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you. Jet lag or no jet lag. So
we're about to talk about Jerry Farrar, right? So
around 2004, 2005, remember back to the bird flu scare, the avian flu scare that created there was a lot of panic about that, promoted by the George W. Bush administration, for example. I think his name was Tommy Thompson, was head of HHS. He said millions were going to die. They used the models from the Imperial College of London, Neil Ferguson, that were wildly wrong again. Right. Donald Rumsfeld had not divested from his stake in Gilead, which produced Tamiflu, which was the main drug marketed as a solution to bird flu that the U.S. had to stockpile. And of course, a lot of that stockpiling are joint HHS and DOD efforts, right? So he just made an insane amount of money. It was very bad. But the reason that panic was allowed to happen was Jeremy Farrar. You look at how that came to be declared, that epidemic, potential pandemic, whatever, of that era. And the WHO had sent a team and decided that avian flu was not in this community. Jeremy Farrar comes and then takes samples, and then of course unsupervised goes back to his lab that's funded by the University of Oxford, and then decides it's there. Right. And then begins coordinating a lot more with the World Health Organization from there on out. But it's this avian flu thing that would not have existed if Farrar had not intervened and actually undermined the WHO scientists of the time. That is where the international health regulations came out of from 2005, a need to have a global framework in response to some sort of global pandemic or epidemic situation. Yeah. And so now you have, at the end of the COVID era, well, actually with the beginning of the COVID era, we know from the release of those Fauci emails that Jeremy Farrar was very involved in correspondence, was outranking Fauci, even though he's not an elected official. He's head of the Wellcome Trust. And he was a person from the World Health Organization that was in those emails, referred to Farrar as their top guy on developing COVID-19 policy and the financing for vaccines and all sorts of stuff. And they don't mention that in this press release that they put out in December, about a month ago, that Farrar is now going to be the chief scientist of the WHO. So you have him there, instrumental in bringing about, more or less, what becomes the international health regulations. He's instrumental in how COVID-19 plays out. And now he's the guy that the World Health Organization is installing as chief scientist at the same time that these international health regulations he helped bring into existence are about to be amended to be a giant power grab. And if those amendments are passed, yes, Tedros would then, essentially have unilateral authority to declare a pandemic of international concern and all of this, and countries would lose their sovereignty about what measures recommended by the WHO they can and cannot prevent the implementation of. It's essentially the WHO guiding global health policy. But those policies, whatever will be imposed on those countries, is what Jeremy Farrar is going to develop as head of the science division. And that's very significant. When you consider that the Wellcome Trust, which he's been leading up until this new post, intimately linked to the eugenics movement over a series of decades, and very much intertwined with the British Eugenics Society, which was renamed the Galton Institute in 1989, and all sorts of very nefarious connections. And of course, what I mentioned just a little bit ago, Wellcome Leap, the global health DARPA created by Jeremy Farrar with former DARPA directors who set up DARPA equivalents for Silicon Valley companies like Google and Facebook, trying to map your toddler's brain, trying to create and grow human machine hybrid organs and transplant them into people. And all of this stuff, this is what Jeremy Farrar sees as scientific innovation. And that is one of the things put out there in the press release touting his appointment as World Health Organization chief scientist. He's going to usher in all of the scientific innovation, which involves strapping stuff to your kid's head and trying to make a model of their brain. And as far as that program goes, by the way, it's not just trying to map a kid's brain. They want to map a bunch of kids' brains, create what they call an in silico or synthetic model of a developing child's brain. And then if your child's brain doesn't fit the model, stage interventions in the development, neurological development of your child so that it fits the model. Yeah. Basically homogenizing human cognition from the time your kids are babies onward.
It's not a surprise, right? When we see videos of Klaus Schwab going could you imagine in 10 years when we have this chip in our brain and we are doing this and I can sense what you want out there? You don't even need to say it. We will know and stuff. Cynthia, do you want to jump on in while we got this? Because I'm so glad you made it here today. I'm really like kind of giddy and smiling. I got Whitney Webb and Cynthia McKinney on my show while the WEF is taking place in Davos, and probably some of the craziest crap is being said as we're having this show right here today. But please jump on in. Let's hear your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia McKinney is with us today, and Whitney Webb, welcome to the show. Your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to make a point to be here, coherent or not, so that I could let Whitney know that the inspiration for my coronavirus book, When China Sneezes, came from her research. And the chapter that she did on DARPA really, I had just come from China, had to do something, had to write something, and your writing had already been there. Your research was already there. So yours was the very first chapter in the book, and it set the tone for where we were going to go and how prescient all of the contributors were, how prescient you were, because you were there before the creation of what I think was the very first book out that basically took the tone that it did, that we're questioning every aspect of the narrative. So with that having been said, I just happened to have been in the Georgia legislature at the time of the policy introduction of public-private partnerships. And it was like something that the politicians didn't know anything about. It was this snazzy, jazzy idea. And so public-private partnerships began to roll off the lips of the politicians. But my dad was against it. And he said, no, because this is going to end up being a private relationship. And that's exactly what we have, a private relationship with public dollars.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It's funny, though. I mean, this public-private conversation has been coming up a lot lately. I don't know if you ladies know, but I've been doing a lot of talking and conversations with the Libertarian Party, saying that, I've talked about this with you last time, Cynthia. I had, Jimmy Dore on who's an anti-imperialist leftist, kind of like myself. And then I had Dave Smith on, who's part of the Mises caucus right now. We've been talking about this, but fundamentally, I think this can get twisted because, the libertarians have this talk, government's awful, government's awful, government's awful, right? And they think that if you eliminate government and you let the private sector just play out, it's going to just straighten itself out somehow. And I don't know how you don't classify that as a utopia, because to think that corruption isn't a human element, that it's just selective to government, is a little crazy. But I mean, it's what we're talking about right now, because I think it's the crux of the problem. How do we square that circle of that public-private issue when, what came first, the chicken or the egg? How do we deal with this if it isn't a form of government that's overlooking and regulation? How does this public-private partnership not get out of hand?
Well, I think it's gotten out of.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, Whitney. We want to hear
Whitney,
from you.
All right, go ahead, Whitney.
No, but you started, so I.
All right, Cynthia, you started. You go first. Look at this. I love the love in this room right now. Cynthia, you go first, and then Whitney will jump in right after. Go ahead.
Well, the problem is that we've got the wrong people in the wrong positions that are governing every aspect of our lives, and we have allowed that to happen. So what started out as an ideal, which was at one time an ideal, well, actually a monarchy was at one time an ideal, right? And then we got the republics, and then from the republics, we've got kakistocracies and we got psychopathocracy, because somehow the public is not able to police adequately the private. And as a result of that, we've got the wrong people in the wrong positions, and now they have become entrenched. So what do we do? I think that the only solution is to get rid of all of the institutions and have direct democracy. That's sort of what I'm championing at the moment, because it's the only way I can see that we can completely raise RAZE everything that is, and then create something that's completely new. And I know you know that Derek Brose is very big on creating the alternative. And so now perhaps we can begin to envision what that alternative would look like, and then begin to create it in the governance sector as well.
Whitney?
All right. So I would say that one of the ways I see the problem is that the top tier of both the public and the private sector are basically controlled by people that are more interested in creating a class of slaves than anything else. And this is what we've seen happen over the course of several decades in the United States. And of course, because the US is an empire with client states all over the world, it of course is international in scope, but it, is policy set to a large degree in the US or the UK or both. And fundamentally, I think what we have is an issue where that particular ideology, this elitism, it's tied up with eugenics, it's tied up with a whole bunch of different things that are ideas that have been around for the better part of the past 100 years, well, beyond really. There's this ideological focus on creating that world. There has been an effort to basically have people that agree with that vision come to dominate the public and private sector. And this has been going on for a long time. I think one continuous thread you can find from where this started to now is the Rockefeller family and how they've shaped our medical system and our education system, how they've influenced our government. And there's a lot of other people in that same power nexus, right? I mean, you have the Rockefellers creating things like the Trilateral Commission being hugely influential, the Council on Foreign Relations, and a lot of these other sort of shadow government organizations that end up telling the public sector what to do. And then you have the issue of how elections in the US have historically been financed. You have the issue of the intelligence agencies merging with organized crime. And ultimately, what those entities both want is fascism. If you look at powerful factions of organized crime in the years leading up to World War II and during World War II, the Italian mafia, for example, hugely supportive of Mussolini, just huge Mussolini fanboys all over the place. And you have people in the national security state of the United States at the time who later become CIA directors, for example, like Alan Dulles, being very, very much in line with Nazism, wanting amnesty for top German officials. And then what happens with Operation Paperclip? We like actually what the Nazis were doing with science stuff and this other stuff. We want to continue those programs and continue some of those policies. And then you have those elements team up together. And it's also in Israel too. Irgun, for example, which is where the ruling Likud party in Israel comes from, is a terrorist organization that was originally inspired by Mussolini, yet again. And Mussolini's definition of fascism was corporatism, the merging of the public and private sector.
Yep.
I would argue that the public-private partnership is a vehicle for making that just the standard globally. And I think we've been seeing an effort to bring this to the forefront over time. And these same groups like the Rockefellers and whatnot, and other related entities, I mean, it's not just them, but I think they're a good visible example to understand how this has worked over the past 100 years. They're very interested in global governance, and admittedly so. David Rockefeller even admitted it in his autobiography before he died. That, if the charge is that my family and I are trying to create a global governance system, then guilty is charged. And these are people that put a lot of money into the United Nations when it was created, donated the land that it sits on in New York City. And so I think, ultimately we're dealing with a lot. part of the problem, I think, is a knowledge deficit on the part of the American and, more broadly speaking, global public, who don't really understand a lot of these histories and the scandals and how this is developed for so long. And a lot of the crazy shenanigans you see going on, and I think you can even make the case too that the WEF itself are intimately tied up specifically with US, UK, and Israeli intelligence. Which is essentially the same core group that was responsible for things like Iran-Contra in the 80s. There was never any accountability for the people involved in this stuff. The group that was behind Iran-Contra, as I talk about in the book, they called themselves the Enterprise. It's a business. And this business model has expanded over time. And the people that are at its core, all they care about is money and control and keeping the public under their thumb indefinitely. And that's where a lot of these policies ultimately lead. So, like Cynthia says, I don't think you can fix any of these issues or the public-private partnership model or the public sector. You really can't fix any of this stuff in our existing power structure at all. It's all got to be thrown out. And there was the argument made in decades past in the US, for example, when there's political scandal. Oh, well, it's just a few rotten apples, so throw out the apples but save the barrel, keep the same system. I mean, that's not obviously doesn't work.
Let me throw something at you real quick, ladies.
Sure.
And I'm going to let Whitney start first, and I'll let Cynthia follow up on this one, because going back to that argument I had the other day with my libertarian friends and whatnot, and I was saying you guys would rather have decisions made in a corporate boardroom rather than made in a city council, whatnot. But it all boils back to what Cynthia just said earlier. We don't have the right people in charge, but I believe we don't have the right people calling the shots because we don't have fair and free, transparent elections. And I know I'm an election geek. This is my thing, right? I went to Brazil, me and Fiorella, Colombia before, and we are like big starch believers that if you have fair elections, it will fix so much stuff. Can fair elections fix a lot of the problems we have with corporations and government, in your opinion, Whitney?
I mean, I think to an extent it can help. Yeah, but the problem is that there's a very specific reason why roughly 20 years ago there was a major effort to force all elections to be digital. And if you look at a lot of the cybersecurity companies or other companies that are part of either sensitive national infrastructure, including election infrastructure in the US, you have foreign intelligence cutouts all over that, most of them Israeli. And it's a very easy system to manipulate. And obviously, as is clear from the current situation in the US, public trust in that system is very low. Paper ballots, all of that stuff. I mean, if you had a good system, I think it could go some way in fixing it to an extent. But again, remember, this is very depends a lot on the country you're talking about. So in the case of the US, most people in the public are only aware of two political parties. Both political parties are incredibly controlled and essentially operate as, arms of this organized crime intelligence complex as it's grown over time. And you can't get like a presidential nomination today in either of those parties without being a corrupt piece of crap. So okay, so you have free and fair elections, but your choices are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, or any of the other John Kerry and George W. Bush. It's like, you can have
a third party get some votes, though, Whitney, right? If a third party can get in there, start getting some momentum,
Yeah, but is that contingent just on having a better election system, as you posit, or would that necessitate changes in the media, changes in how the political parties themselves are run? All sorts of things would have to change to make that a distinct possibility. Otherwise, it would take many years, and it's very possible, even with free and fair elections, a guy gets voted in that suspends a lot of the levers of democracy, right? Or suspends the fair election system that you've installed. So this is kind of hard stuff to talk about generally. Obviously, when people feel like they have a voice and a say, things probably go better and there's better trust in the system. But what we're seeing now with the World Economic Forum and other groups is how to continue with those same controlled, corrupt systems, but make the public trust it more. That's why for the past several years, their big theme has been, how do we restore trust with the public? And a lot of that relies on censorship, on propaganda and psyops to a significant degree. And yeah, I think we're in a really unprecedented territory with respect to those things, in unprecedented efforts to manipulate people's perception of the state in which they live and the government, the private sector, at a time when they're trying to sell a lot of different narratives that ultimately, if you believe them and you buy the solutions that they're selling as part of those narratives, lead to increased top-down control, global governance, technocracy, and essentially some form of, technocratic slavery, really, at the end of the day, neo-feudalism.
Yeah. Cynthia, you want to take a shot at this? You're an election geek too, as well. I believe you wrote a book about the last 100 years of elections, I think. So why don't you give us your opinions about that? I know we have limited time with Whitney, and we'll get you out of here shortly. I just got one small section after this question right here. But can fair elections fix a lot of the problems we have with these private institutions and governments, the public sector? What do you think?
No. Fair, no. Because the problem is much broader and way more deep than just fair elections. As Whitney indicated, that we have problems with election campaign finance. We have problems with election administration. We have problems. The biggest problem, however, I believe, is in public education. And so if you still have the same how can I say, low information individuals who are not given the adequate tools in order to make informed consent. Everyone's talking about informed consent in the medical sphere. Let's also talk about informed consent in the political sphere. And so therefore, without informed consent, you're going to get the same kinds of decision making, even if it's through a transparent process. So you've got to have that civic education. You've got to have that spirit of activism. You've got to have all of that sort of working together, the spirit of debate. You've got to have all of that. And if you don't have that combined with the campaign finance reform and the election administration and the election transparency, if you don't have one single component missing, then it's not going to work. You got to have all of it.
A free media, right? Our voices can't be restrained anymore.
Like for example, and I know we're out of time, but Whitney has done a ton of research in One Nation Under Blackmail, volumes 1 and 2. She's done a ton of research. Now, where does that research take us into public policy, in the public policy arena? And if we don't have a response in public policy to this ton of research that Whitney has been done and put forward to the public, then the public itself is a part of complicit in the problem. Yeah. And we can't have that. We have to do everything that we can to give the public the opportunity to have the tools with which to make better decisions about its governance. But like, again, I say, I don't want someone else exercising sovereignty for me, because I can exercise the sovereignty for myself. Other people should be in that condition, and that is through political education.
Got it. Did you want to piggyback anything on that, Whitney, or might you want me to get you with my last question?
Well, I guess I would just say that the conclusion from the my book, thanks so much, Cynthia, for plugging it, is that seriously, the corruption issue is so insane. I mean, I pretty much stopped the timeline of the book at the early 2000s. But by that point, it's so insane to imagine it went on and continued to evolve and get more entrenched and even more corrupt 20 years after that point is totally mind-boggling. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of really crazy conclusions, I guess, that sort of come out of a work like that. But ultimately, it's at a point where there has to be accountability. This has to be investigated by people with the proper clearances, because I don't even live in the US. This is all open source stuff and history stuff, really, that's available that I had at my disposal. But it needs to be investigated, but the government isn't capable of investigating itself. What do we do in that situation?
Yeah.
What do we do? Right. And that's the conversation I hope people have when they read it, because ultimately you can't trust crap the public sector does, specifically at the national level and probably at the state level. Local level, probably a little more variable. In the US, it's a big country. There's a lot of variation in local governments. As I've said before, decentralization is really the only way out of this, and getting more involved in your local government is really all you can do if you want to have any sort of aspect of government potentially on your side, because you're not going to get it from the state and national level at all.
Corey Morningstar says the only way we can break this technocratic change is we throw our phone into the lake and just stop playing in that old.
Yeah, but I think also a lot of people have been very conditioned to convenience, and the smartphone is sort of a symbol of convenience. A lot of things we used to do before we don't do anymore, but a lot of the same tendencies that we've seen develop culturally as a result of the smartphone are only going to get worse over time.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that too with this. Well, for example, this new thing that's been put out by OpenAI, the Chat GPT, right? So if you think about the smartphone and how convenient it is, you don't, how many people back when you were a kid or younger had to remember all the like 20 or more phone numbers in your brain of your friends, your school, your grandparents, your home, all this stuff. And now how many numbers do you remember? Probably none, because you use your smartphone for it. How much mental math can you do? Well, the smartphone has a calculator, so I haven't done mental math and, since I've had one, however that long is for you. Okay, so people are saying Chat GPT is going to start doing people's homework for them soon. By 2025, mainstream media is saying 90% of the content on the internet is going to be written by entities like Chat GPT. Jeez. What happens when AI just starts writing and speaking and communicating for us, or replaces all mainstream media journalists?
Yeah.
And
replacing teachers as well, because I can easily see my role as a professor being overtaken by that Chat GPI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's the ultimate psyop. It's the ultimate way to completely, at a scale never before dreamt about, manipulate people's perception of history, of events, of current events, of their lives, of themselves. And there's an effort to sort of frame the same type of language model that Chat GPT is as sentient. Like there was this effort to do that with the Google AI equivalent of that called Lambda last year. And it was obviously fake. Because the guy even had to admit later the transcript that supposedly proved sentience, he had heavily edited and he would not release the original transcript.
Yeah. Have you guys seen some of the art that the AI is producing of us, the AI art shit? Because it's like this AI has a very dark kind of like thought process when it comes to America.
Yeah. So I think
producing creepy crap. Go ahead.
Here's something I'd like everyone to understand about AI. So AI at this point is not creative, but there's efforts underway to frame it as being creative, as being capable of organic activity and that spark that organic life has, that human life has to create. They are trying to tell you, look at the AI art generator, look how cool its stuff is. It produced this from nothing. Well, not really. It's been trained on images and images and images from the internet. It's amalgamating stuff. It's imitating it. It's a very effective imitator. And the same is true of human speech. And so these language models are just imitating people, and they're very good at it at this point. But that's not sentience, right? That's not consciousness. They're not organically creating this stuff. Mm-hmm. They're algorithms trained on infinite data sets, every message probably ever sent on the internet. That's billions upon billions upon billions of messages, probably it's an insane number if you think about it. So why would it not iterate, I don't know, be an effective imitator of that stuff. But there's going to be a point where they try and claim that this singularity event has happened. And I would argue they're going to do it. They're going to psyop it. It's not going to happen. They're going to claim it's happened.
Yeah.
And that's because you're having people like Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger writing books about the age of AI and how AI needs to become our new government. Because they'll say it has a superior intelligence and it's so smart that it can't possibly justify itself. It just issues these edicts. Computer says yes, computer says no, and you can't ask it to explain itself or to justify anything. And if you're someone like Henry Kissinger, what a gift. What a gift. I want to murder a bazillion people over in Southeast Asia and carpet bomb over there. Well, the computer said so, and it's super intelligent and smarter than all of us put together, and it can't justify why, and it says this is how we're going to win the game, so let's do it, But it's really, just a blank check for them to put whatever policy and power and be like, a superior intellect came up with this and it can't explain it to you, but we must implement it right away. And that's the model for governance. But, what I'm trying to show here is that AI, this whole like fourth industrial revolution stuff, the age of AI is about advancing this atrophy of our humanity, of our abilities as humans, and making us good little slaves. We're basically training our replacements, with
building
the
our
smartphone.
own prison, right?
Yeah, but that's
ourselves.
what it is. So there should be a red line for everyone about this stuff with technology at some point. Don't put it in your body. That should be the red line for everyone sane. I would say, obviously if you're like a blind person and you want to try out Neuralink because you like, those cases, I'm not going to get into those. Yeah. But the commercialization of this, the idea that it's going to be necessary to compete and to make money and compete in the future and all of that. No.
Yeah.
No. There's no need for any of that. But that should be a red line. And then when it's coming, the plan to have your government issued ID linked to your internet activity. So everything you do online is surveilled and linked to your ID, which is a World Economic Forum policy. But the policy body at the WEF that produced that includes the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI. The UK Crimes Agency and the Israeli cyber directorate. I forget the exact name, but it's again the US, UK, and Israeli governments, and it's all of the big banks.
Yeah.
Most of the
all
big
trusted
banks,
institutions that are very well trusted, right?
Yeah, they argue, among other things, that the only way to prevent imminent financial cyber attack that's going to destroy the existing financial system is to merge Wall Street, their regulators, and U.S. intelligence agencies all into one.
Yeah. So we have all these crazy predator class people that you just mentioned over here. We're talking about this AI. We're talking about what I like to call sarcastically the masters of the universe. And then we have their foot soldiers and their minions down below. One of their foot soldiers and minions had to call it a quits. I don't know if you ladies saw this, but Jacinda from New Zealand, we had some of the worst, laws, rules, protocols thrusted on their people came out of New Zealand. I want to play this quick clip. It's just her resigning really quickly. And then I want to get your opinion on what you think, because since you swim in these waters, Whitney, of dealing with the predator class, and since, Cynthia, you're an ex-lawmaker here in the United States, I want to know your opinion on how these people should be dealt with, because it's something that me and Steve disagreed with this morning. And it's kind of weird because I'm looked at as the nice guy, the Ed Pasta loves everybody. He's fun with everybody. And Steve's known as like that kind of cold person that's really rough and tug it. But yet here's Steve saying, well, do we have right to take a life? And I'm like, Mussolini treatment for some of these people so this shit doesn't happen again. So let's just play this really quick clip. It's just 2 seconds of Jacinda. And then I want to get your opinions about what a fair punishment for people like Jacinda and others are, because we hear everybody going Nuremberg 2.0, and I'm like, please stop it. Let's just take a quick look, and then we'll get your opinions.
And so today I'm announcing that I will not be seeking re-election, and that my term as Prime Minister will conclude no later than the 7th of February.
I mean, obviously that was from like a World Cup game that they kind of put that in.
They Photoshop.
They photoshopped that in. That was, but I thought it was hysterical. I thought it was fun. But Cynthia, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think fair punishment for people like Jacinda and others would be fair like her? You know, I'm saying it's just like her. What do they deserve?
Well, I guess I'm kind of like you, Pasta. I am normally against the death penalty. But what we're dealing with here is not just a betrayal of sort of government institutions and our faith, whatever that might be, in a governance system or our existing governance structure, but these are crimes against humanity. And so I think that these people should be held to account by the people, by humanity. And so therefore, the people's tribunals that I participated in a lot of them, and I have the work that was done was very seriously approached, and the conclusions that we arrived at were very seriously considered. But at the end of the day, they were just people's tribunals without any teeth. We need people's tribunals that have teeth. And then that means that we, the people, have to have a structure to enforce the results of the tribunal. And does that mean street justice? Well, that's what we've gotten. Does that mean mob justice? Well, that's what has been given to us. I mean, it's the mob. And so whatever length we have to go to in order to exact justice for crimes against humanity, I think is fair game.
Whitney?
Alrighty. Well, I think at this point, most governments in the world are essentially run by organized crime. So if you realize that it's the mob in charge of your government, what happens to the mob? What would you like to see happen to the mob and the mafia and people who, they're essentially terrorists, I guess is probably another way of framing it. I mean, what did we see over the course of the COVID-19 crisis? What the use of terror for ends that are resulting in massive harms to people, loss of bodily autonomy, loss of major constitutional freedoms. It's terrorism. And if you look, at the CIA, for example, and the U.S. national security state, arguably the biggest and most damaging terrorist organization in the world with the biggest death toll. And oddly enough, probably the biggest purveyor of actual conspiracy theories, with WMDs in Iraq being at the top of the list. But I mean, there's plenty of them, right? Mm-hmm. So everything that the American public are told are bad, and these are bad people, in reality, that's the power structure that we have. So, I mean, what do people... what kind of justice is there for that? I mean, at this point, the death toll that these people are responsible for, counting COVID and other things, is astronomically high. So when you're talking about people like Jacinda Ardern, is she liable for the deaths of people in New Zealand over that were a result of her policies? Well, in history, when people die in mass as a result of policies, normally the leaders are held liable. The only way she could really defend herself would be to release documentation showing that it was other people essentially forcing her to enforce those policies.
Yeah.
And that would necessitate an investigation. And again, none of these governments are actually capable of investigating themselves in any meaningful way. So again, not unlike Cynthia said, I mean, there's going to be a point where people feel like they have to take if they want justice, they're going to have to get it themselves. Yeah. And essentially, what we were talking about earlier with the World Health Organization and this power grab, the people that helped orchestrate what we saw over the past 3-ish years or so are going to keep doing this stuff until their heads get chopped off, essentially.
Okay. We agree on the same type of punishment.
They're going to keep doing it until something stops them. It's not going to be the FBI or the Department of Justice coming to the rescue, right? Yeah. So how are they going to be stopped? It's going to be something. But at the same time, they're preparing for that. What do you think this whole infrastructure for the war on domestic terrorism is?
That's right. They're preparing for it. That's right.
They anticipate it because they know it's going to get to that point, and there's a major effort on their part to set up the infrastructure to make dissent impossible in the U.S.
Yeah, and they're doing a pretty good job
online and offline. Yeah. But this is an agenda that goes back a very long time, and the internet has always been a very intimate part of that for these people, right? Or databases and software. It's all been very much interconnected. A really good book is by Yasha Levine, Surveillance Valley, The Military Origins of the Internet, and how ARPA, the precursor to DARPA, created the internet for specific purposes. And then you have the 1980s that create this dissident database main core with the Promise software to decide who to round up in a vaguely defined national emergency that includes their list of possible national emergencies where they could invoke these protocols, mass nonviolent mobilization against a U.S. military intervention abroad, like the illegal invasion of Iraq or any illegal invasion anywhere. Mm-hmm. People nonviolently protest and get in the streets, and then the national security state of the U.S. in the 1980s was planning to round those people up illegally.
That's right.
And take away their constitutional rights and all of that. So if they're going to do that for nonviolent protest, I mean, this was in the 1980s, and those same people were put in charge of surveillance programs after 9/11, like John Poindexter being put in charge of total information awareness. Now total information awareness has become Peter Thiel's Palantir, and these programs are still around and are more technologically advanced than they were before. And, maybe this is scary to people, but ultimately it shows that they know what they're doing is wrong, and they know there's going to be pushback, and they're trying to prepare for that, and they're scared of it. Yeah. They wouldn't be erecting all this technological stuff, these, fortresses around themselves to keep their government in power, their system in power, if they knew it wasn't killing people. I mean, they know it's killing people and ruining people's lives. So, when people are put in the position of, do I want this system to kill me, or do I do something? I mean, I think there might be a point where there's a lot of significant amount of people who feel that way and are like, I can't live anymore, or my life isn't worth living anymore because of this system. And yeah, people might start doing something about it. But again, the most important battlefield of this coming clash, whatever you want to call it, is going to be in the media. The narrative about who these people are acting out, the narrative about who is a domestic terrorist and who's not. And if you look at how the Biden administration has written about their domestic terrorism policies, it's not just, what they say in the media, right, about, right-wing Trump supporter, whatever. No, the documentation talks about people on the left and the right, people who oppose globalism, who oppose, I forget, some sort of like corporate influence globally, like multinational corporations exerting policy global. I mean, a bunch of stuff that I think most people would probably have sentiments of in the U.S. at this point can potentially be labeled domestic terrorists. Yeah. Under these metrics. It's a very slippery slope. But they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't expect pushback to a significant degree, and if they didn't know there was this animosity there, and again, if they didn't know that what they are doing is murdering people, destroying people's lives, murdering children. It's just yeah, I don't know. We live in a really crazy world. I don't know.
I'm going to let Cynthia jump in there, but and we got to get, Whitney's got to get out of here. So I'll let you wrap everything up with Whitney. But let me just say this much. I don't say and propose capital punishment to these eugenicist bastards because it's a way of achieving vengeance. I say it as a possibility, as a deterrent for people trying to do this in the future, but go ahead.
Well, we've very well analyze the situation, and we put forward some solutions. My final question for Whitney is, do you have any inkling whatsoever that we, the people, can finally win in this battle?
Yeah, well, I think people can win, but it all comes down to a test of what ultimately I think is personal responsibility. Are you going to be a slave to convenience and use technology that you're accustomed to, but you didn't have to use 10, 15, 20 years ago, that's being used to enslave you? A lot of people aren't going to walk away from that because they're comfortable. So short story, one of the reasons I got super disillusioned with the US, and I left the US when I was in my early 20s because I was very disillusioned with it. I'm a millennial, right? So most everyone I knew that was like my age, I was very politically aware about this stuff back then. And I would talk about it and like, don't you see how this is going to get worse if people don't do something about it? Like, don't you care about where things are going? And this was like, 2012, a while ago. And people were like, well, as long as I have Netflix and beer, why do I care? And I think a lot of Americans are like that. Are they still like that? Well, I think the WEF crowd is definitely going to make sure that the compliant ones have their breads and circuses. Maybe it's in the metaverse. Maybe you have to live like, the people in the Matrix or something like that. But they plan to take your dignity from you and your humanity from you, whether you comply or not. I think that's pretty clear. So ultimately, people have to decide, what side they are on. And if you're not going to be herded into that reality and have that be your life and your children's life, you have to make decisions that might be uncomfortable. But it's not like it's going to kill you any more than what these people are proposing, right? And ultimately it comes down to parallel systems, like I can't remember which one of you mentioned Derek, but Derek Rose also talks about this a lot, and I think he's very right. Decentralized local parallel systems, an alternative banking system, whatever that looks like for you, an alternative system for the food supply for your essential needs. That's what people need to get in order in their lives, and it's at the local level. It's 100% at the local level. You cannot depend on the national and state governments, and even probably your local government, depending on where you live, to save you from this. And a lot of it is, you don't even necessarily have to have a lot of capital to invest in these systems yourself. If you don't have it, you can on YouTube, there's like infinite videos about how to grow your own food or different skills, learn how to knit, there's all these different things you can teach yourself, and that's a tremendous asset. And that doesn't necessarily cost money; it costs time. It's an investment of time. So you don't necessarily have to have thousands and thousands of dollars to go build your off-grid homestead. You can find things that make you an asset and can help you build those parallel systems. But a lot of it, I think a lot of people too were like, I'm going to go off in the middle of nowhere and just be a totally isolated bubble. You need community too.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm from, like Cynthia, I'm from the American South. And in my experience, at least in the South, people do come together when stuff gets hard. And, hopefully, it's my hope that in the US, that will happen. The tougher things get, more people will be coming together. So I think that ultimately is the way out. But I think people really need to understand the level of the degree of manipulation that's going on with the media right now, specifically online. There is so much. You're interacting on Twitter. You don't know who's real and who's not. A lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah.
And we're getting to a point where a lot of content being produced, they're already saying AI is going to make 90% of content on the internet by 2025. People really need to know where they stand and know what they believe and not be so easily persuaded and influenced by stuff they see online. And I think part of that is part of what that necessitates is sort of extricating ourselves a bit from the digital sphere and starting to go back to the real world, because we're being herded into the metaverse essentially. Right. So we need to get out. To avoid going and being trapped in their virtual reality, we have to come back to actual reality.
Yeah. Well, we'll let you go. We'll get you out of here because I don't want to keep you too long. But I don't know about that, because I just want to make this one statement that I get it. What you and Derek are saying, and Steve's been talking about it, parallel societies. But we live in a world where it's illegal to collect rainwater. Robert Kennedy said at the DC Defeat the Mandates, and this is he got in trouble for, they're planning on mapping the whole planet over here.
Sure.
You know, and he got in trouble because he was referring to like Anne Frank was able to stay off the grid and stay safe from the Nazis. We're not going to have that luxury. So for me, I have this mentality, and I've gone down to the global south, and I've seen these countries that have formed a collective government because the empire is on the neck. That we're not going to be able to breathe until these psychopaths are dealt with. So I get the fact that we want to build these parallel societies, but until these crazy bastards are dealt with, they'll never let us breathe and let us be alone.
Yeah, okay. So I understand that, but a lot of this ultimately, at least in the earlier stages of how this is playing out, is going to come down to, I think, non-compliance. How would have the last 3 years have been if people around the world had said, I'm not going to do this mandate stuff. I'm not going to be a guinea pig against my will. I think it would have been very different.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff you're talking about like getting these bastards and all that stuff may have come from those, may have been a consequence of those mass acts of non-compliance. Hopefully, my hope is there will be some sort of red line. Maybe it comes from the WHO, whatever, but I think there's going to be this push there is a push actually to market transhumanism, which ultimately is repackaged eugenics, as healthcare and as a way to force it into the population. So when people say, no, I'm not going to comply with this, microchip stuff or whatever, and, if it gets to that point, mass non-compliance, people aren't going to do it. Well, if they don't have mass non-compliance, what are they going to do? Light the whole world on fire? Well, they would have done that anyway. And they probably would have done it a long time ago, to be honest. But they don't want to kill themselves off either, right? They feel like they're the managerial class and they want to be there forever, in charge of everything. But ultimately, a lot of these people have power because we've given them that power, and it's time to take that power back. And one of the ways they maintain that power is because we're scared of them. We think they're scary, and when you're scared of someone, you're giving them power over you, ultimately. So if you don't want these people to control your lives, you can't be afraid of what they're going to do. Well, in theory, I live in Chile and I'm seeing stuff that's inconvenient to the establishment. So they could probably drone bomb me, but that's not going to change what I'm doing and how I live my life, because I'm thinking about some hypothetical that might happen because they have the technology to do it and they're awful, insane, bad people, Yeah.
You're such a smarty pants, you know what I'm saying? Whatever.
Oh.
Whatever. Elections, all my ideas, whatever, get shot down. Anything else to talk about, Whitney?
I'm not trying to shoot you down. I'm just saying.
I know you're not. I'm just
different
having
levels
fun.
of this stuff. So, I don't think necessarily all the big black boots are going to come out. They can't round up everyone in the world that's a dissident all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think mass non-compliance goes a long way. And in the US, that might turn into something like half the population decides not to pay tax anymore or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be about biosecurity, medical stuff. But I think that stuff may come, you know what I mean? And when the government's dealing with mass non-compliance and it's too many people and their police force, their military can't do enough domestically to force them to do it, it's over. It's over.
Yeah. And I was only teasing with that comment. We love your opinions and everything you got going. You do amazing work, Whitney Webb. Cynthia, you got any goodbyes to say to Whitney to get her out of here? Because I don't want to keep her too long because I want to have her back on.
Yeah, I do have to go. I have to go get my kids.
That's right. No, it was great seeing you, Whitney, and sharing this time with you. And I look forward to being able to do it again when I'm a little bit more coherent.
All right, super. Well, I thought you were perfectly coherent. Yeah. Well, anyway, talk soon. Take care, y'all. Thanks for having me on.
Where can we find your interview with Robert Kennedy Jr.? I heard that really was lit.
So the last time I did an interview with him, it was a couple years ago. It was on the Defender podcast, which is
why is it popping up now? Are they just refloating that?
Sometimes people reshare it. Yeah, okay. I think I went on twice. One time I talked about the Ukraine stuff when it was first starting, and the previous time I was talking about some of my other work as it relates to COVID-19 stuff.
Nice. I haven't seen those, so I'm going to go back and revisit them. Thank you so much for coming on, Whitney Webb, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cynthia, how you doing over there?
Oh my gosh, I'm struggling, but it's okay. I'm gonna survive it.
Well, that's the end of the show. So
my struggle is public, so everybody sees it. I'm struggling right now, but anyway, I'm happy to be with you. And I promise you that I'll have everything set up. You know, StreamYard is a little bit difficult for me to navigate because the green screen thing, I went out after the airport. Now I'm flying for like 40 hours and including layover. And so I get off the plane. I said, oh, I've got this interview on Convo Couch, which I thought was tomorrow and not today in the first place. And I go and I get a screen so I can do a green screen, right? And then it doesn't work. Well, you know, it's kind of working, but it's not really working. So I got to get my studio set up so that I can do these things on the fly. I'm noticing your background. I'm also noticed Whitney's background. So she's got that specialized where you don't use the virtual background. So I need something like that. And then on Zoom, I can use the virtual. And I went out and bought a screen. I've got the green drape that goes over it. So I've got that now, but I couldn't use it on StreamYard. So I'm disappointed.
It's okay, though. But listen, you got some time to practice. I think the exciting news is that Cynthia McKinney is building a studio. So we're going to hear more from Cynthia and get it out there because, you know, you had that time where you were kind of like, after Congress and all that bullshit you went through, it like you obviously had a target on your back, so you had to stay quiet and lay low. But now that you're kind of like Donna Summer, I'm coming out. I believe she's saying it. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that you have a studio, right? That's the exciting news. And listen, there are ways that, and if you need help, we can help you. You can watch a couple tutorials. I switched to StreamYard about 8 months ago, and I now engineer my own shows, and it's so simple. You watch a couple tutorials. It's very easy to pick up. I think it's better than doing the Zoom and restream thing. That's my personal opinion, but I can help you out with some stuff. I'll send you a tutorial, and it just gets easy because then if you decide, hey, if I want to have this is a real background, so this is a real TV here and whatnot. But if you have the green screen, you just got to cover your whole area. You got to kind of like straighten it out. And there are like little kind of things that you can put it on like a coat rack hanger. So it's flat and it's even and it covers the whole screen. So then you can get yourself where you got to go. And then you just have to have it back further enough and your lighting straight. You can straighten all that out. And I think it's going to be awesome. And I think like I said, the exciting news is that Cynthia McKinney is going to be building a studio, doing more shows. So if we can have more of her, that would be great. Before you jumped on, I've said this before, like to me, you're the last great congressperson. Obviously, I supported Tulsi and I stood by her, but there was a lot of discrepancies there and a lot of things that I was like, nah, I don't know, whatnot. You have always been out there front and center. What you did for 9/11, demanding an independent investigation, what you've done for elections and putting a spotlight out there, what you did in Israel, in Palestine on the flotillas and spending time in a jail. I can't thank you enough. I know Fiorella was so jealous when I said my special co-host is Cynthia McKinney, and she got mad. She's like, you're going to have Cynthia McKinney and Whitney Webb on the same show when I'm not there. And I'm like,
I know.
Yep. So please come back soon when you get the studio built in any way I can help you out. We're going to end the show now, but I want to talk about elections with you, like hardcore. I want to do a deep dive. I just wrote the Brazil. My first thing, what I'm doing is called the Election Files. And the first one I did was the way the media, and it was only a small group of conservative populist right media that really misrepresented what went on in Brazil. And whether we like Lula or not, or whether we're fearful of his relationship with the WEF. First of all, Bolsonaro had a relationship with the WEF too as well, and he let in all these multinational corporations come in and just rape the agricultural blind while crushing the small landowner and the small farmer. People don't talk about that, but this small ecosystem of populist right information that didn't even go to observe the elections, just got it so wrong. So I want to send the Brazil file over to you, the election files, the Brazil file, so you can take a look at it. I'd love to get your opinion. I'd love you to come back on the show. But the state of elections in the United States, right? And even though they were trying to implement these rules of mass drop boxes and mail-ins and stuff, and you know about this better than anybody. And by the way, Governor Kemp is at Davos I don't know.
I know. I have my own ideas about what happened in Georgia with the elections, and we can talk about that another time when I can get a little bit more
Please.
information. But
Yeah.
I think it's really clear that that was a deal that was made. And
Raphael Warnock, right? Like Kemp, it seemed
yeah.
like a deal. I mean, Mr. Warnock, Raphael Warnock, went to Ukraine with Nancy Pelosi. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, he's protected. There's no way they're going to let him lose. That was the thing. Go over there. And I mean, because why would can you explain to me why a man like Raphael Warnock would have to go to Ukraine? Why would his constituents in Georgia say, oh, thank God you went to Ukraine for us? I mean, there's no reason. It seems like there was a deal that was made and he kept his seat. So we'll dive into that, and we'll dive into this whole drop boxes, mail-ins. Arizona, very interesting thing, and I got the goods on it. My second election files, and this will be out before you come back on the show, will be about what took place in Maricopa County. Because when you have a system that has mass mail-outs where 1.9 million out of 2.4 million eligible voters get a mail-in ballot 3 weeks before the election, and then they have a week after to count, and 70% of your ballots are mail-in ballots. How can you have a fair election, Cynthia?
That it's not fair. It's not fair, and it's not transparent, and it was built to be unfair, and it was built to be opaque. So therefore, that whole system. There's a lawyer by the name of Edwin Vieira who actually I interviewed him doing this whole election series, and he has him together with Garland Favorito in Georgia, who's doing the Vote Georgia litigation. The two of them together, I think, have a system that could actually work, and that we should work toward implementing until we can implement the revolutionary system that I would propose. But until then, I think we could go with the two of them, where you have average ordinary people administering the elections and average ordinary people counting the ballots, and everything done in public, and everybody gets a chance to see.
Yeah. Well, I put that on the screen. What's the most pressing issue? This is a question we'll get to next time you're on the show. But I got to tell you this much. After going overseas and seeing these elections and seeing a fair system, how simple and easy it is and how obtainable it is. I mean, I think it's the biggest hustle on the American people. The oldest hustle, I think, is probably keep them divide and conquer. But the biggest one, because they make you believe that we can't have a simple, fair, transparent election in a short amount of time with results that night. I just think that is the biggest hustle on the face of the earth, because it's very obtainable. It's very easy. Would you agree to that it could be done? Because you've studied elections really a lot, I mean, is this not the biggest hustle? I mean, it could be done easily. Can it not?
Well, you've got a lot of middlemen who are making a lot of money off of elections.
Yeah.
And elections should be about the people's will, not the corporate profit bottom line.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, everything in the United States, I guess this is a result of neoliberalism, has become about the bottom line and the corporate bottom line, not even the public bottom line. So yes, it is possible for us to get elections where we can vote in one day and we can get the election results that night. Yes, it's possible. And for us to have confidence that the election result that is announced is the actual result that reflects the people's will.
I got this up here really quickly. I'm going to get you out of here right now. This is my six principles to free, fair elections. And number one is really got your name written all over it. The first show you ever did with us, Cynthia, I asked you, what's the number one area in which we need to fix in our elections? And you said, the people need to take it back. And at first I was like, that's just like a very very kind of campy, and it's just kind of sounds good. It's like a bumper sticker. But no, when I go overseas and I see these elections taking place, it's not just about election day. It's the whole process throughout. From one election to years the next one. They go to classes they understand. In Brazil, When I got to this precinct early to canvass the precinct to see what was going on, I saw a line of 200 people there. And I was like, wow, the voters are here early. It wasn't the voters. It was the workers. It was the citizens. Because it was
the citizens.
They need to be involved. We shouldn't be outsourcing this work to these companies where people don't have skin in the game. The citizens have skin in the game. Let's let them work together to make sure there's full transparency in our elections and we can get it done. Cynthia, thank you for having that impact on me. Thank you for coming on the show. Please come back on soon when Fam gets back from the Donbass, because she was really upset that I was doing a show with you and Whitney without her. So please come on back. But let everybody know where they can find you, your work. You have an amazing Telegram.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were on my Telegram. Okay, yeah. Telegram right now is the place for me because at least I don't get threatened with censorship. But I'm also on Twitter and I'm on Facebook. I'm in Facebook jail on my official page. So, but I'm still on Facebook on my
What'd you do?
Page.
What'd you do?
They say I have too many community strikes. They say on my official page, they say I have too many supporters, too many fans, and therefore my reach is broad. And because of that, I have to exercise more responsibility and toe their line. So that's why I'm in Facebook prison. Yeah. I refuse to do anything. So,
Hey, Cynthia McKinney, ladies and gentlemen, she's here with us. Thank you so much for getting on in there after a long trip. We love you, Cynthia, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
I'll have my studio the next time we talk.
Definitely. Any advice or help you need on that, you let us know, and we got the help for you. We've been through all the headaches, so we know the best way to get things done.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Cynthia. Dr. McKinney, ladies and gentlemen, isn't that awesome? We love her. One of our favorites. I mean, when I say one of the last great congresswomen, I really mean that stuff because she did so much. She was out there. One of the only few to talk about having an independent investigation on 9/11. Just so many things that she did. She also talked about geoengineering, right? Like I didn't get a chance to talk about the whole geoengineering situation because that stuff's crazy as well. Let's take a look really quick at our super raise and get us on out of here. I want to thank everybody today for coming on the show. So you'll see a little video of me over here, there, whatever. What I'm going to do is really quickly, don't pay attention to me, but on the right, Trey Wright, thank you for the super Ray contribution. Always appreciated on the couch. The Peasant Party, thank you for the super Ray contribution. It's always appreciated on the couch. TD, how you been, brother? They hate us to be together. Together, we connect the dots. We do. Tim L, seeing Dr. McKinney and Whitney Webb together on the same show is a great Friday treat. They are like the detoxification for the soul. That's right. Thomas Hutchison, great content. Cynthia, Whitney, and Pasta, and Harrison Robertson. Thank you for the Super Ray contribution. It is always appreciated on the couch. Guys, these Super Rays mean so much to us. We can't do it without you. You guys make the show go. Back Monday, Fiorella will be back on the show. I don't know. I'm trying to confirm. Hopefully, Scott Horton will join us this Monday on the Convo Couch as Fiorella returns from the Donbass. That should be a very interesting conversation. On Wednesday, we have a special panel. We're going to go early at 10 a.m. So following the morning show, the Wednesday panel, you know that libertarians that I'd like to bring them on right now that I'm considering it, call myself a leftist libertarian, haven't joined the party, but considering it, looking at it as a vessel with ballot access to get our election straight. We'll see. But on Wednesday at 10 a.m., this is going to be a power panel. We will have Spike Cohen and Dave Smith of the Libertarian Party on one side. And then I got a couple commies lined up on the other side, Fiorella and Caleb Malpin. So this is going to be a great conversation about communism, about liberalism, about all these things, about how we get them straight. That's why I have these conversations. I think they're so important. So that's going to be Wednesday. And we'll have great guests throughout the week, too, as well. Be back on the morning show, too, as well on Monday, y'all. So thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you so much for supporting us. Look forward to Fiorella's return on Monday from the Donbass. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great weekend. Have some fun. I have some sangria made at home, So I'm going to have some sangria this weekend. We love you guys. Convo out. We'll see you soon.